Welcome to the Talking Transformation podcast, presented to you from Cape Town here in the Western Cape, South Africa. The podcast is presented with a view to providing a platform and voice for built environment professionals and interest groups who are working towards transforming the places and spaces here in South Africa. It's dedicated to the individuals and community groups who are supporting both the formal and informal processes that are shaping our cities and our spaces. In today's episode of the Talking Transformation podcast, we take a closer look at the private finance models that are available to micro developers, what progress has been made, and what ambitions this emerging sector has. Bitprop Finance are currently making a dent here in the housing market in Cape Town. Bitprop's finance mission is to create assets and income streams for underdeveloped markets by upscaling backyard rental properties. They're using innovative thinking, technology, and securing title deeds to help make a dent into the 65 million housing opportunities that they say are required across Africa at a cost of $10 trillion. Private credit and private finance have clearly got a role to play, but the approach of Bitprop is not only limited to credit. It considers economic and spatial transformation and urban management fundamentals. Things like securing ownership, homeowner education, rental management capacity, and enhancing the neighbourhoods within which these properties are located. What's exciting about this initiative is the potential reach of the programme, the diversity in investment sources, and the monthly income and returns for the lending homeowners. Is this the basis for an upscale human settlement approach for South Africa in the future? What can be done to support the efforts, and does the public sector have a role in resourcing this type of approach further? To help us understand the potential and the approach, today we hear from Claire de Trevaux, Architectural Project Manager at Bitprop. She's an architect by trade and a graduate of the University of Pretoria, and she's just about to celebrate her second full year working with the Bitprop team. In our conversation, where I get confused by the UKs Britpop movement of the 90s, characterised by Oasis and Blur, and this Bitprop finance movement characterised by spatial and economic transformation, I assure you the fault is entirely mine. We hope you enjoy the episode. As always, encourage your feedback through our social media platforms, including Twitter. You can find us at Talking Transfo and the number 1, or leave us a voice message on our voice message service on the Anchor podcast platform app. We hope you enjoy the episode. So it's just gone 6 o'clock here in Cape Town, and I'm joined this evening by Claire de Trevaux and Amal Sally, both of whom are in Cape Town. Good evening to you both. Let's start with you, Claire. Where do we find you and how are you keeping this evening?
Evening, Pete. I am really well. It's a great day on site with some great people today. I'm coming from Sea Point, and I'm really excited to be here this evening with you guys.
Thanks so much for being with us, Claire. You're very welcome. Great to have you on board. And Amal, across in Gardens, how are you keeping?
Good. I'm surviving the very windy day we have today. But yeah, very excited for the conversation.
Well, let's get straight into it then. And Claire, we're going to talk quite a lot about what you've been up to today in terms of the on-site and what it is you do with Bitprop. But I guess the opening question to you, dealing in this sort of private sector market and the finance angle of the sector, is what is your sort of sense of the state of play within the South African housing environment in 2020, and how do you think it's maybe changed or amplified certain aspects during this year that will go down as the year of the COVID-19 pandemic?
What we've really seen sort of from the pandemic and in general this year, or in the last 3 to 5 years, is a real kind of emergence of innovation in the housing space. I think there are a lot more players, especially in this private sector, who are coming in and saying, you know what, we can do this, we can build houses, and it doesn't have to just be big development companies. And so we're seeing the kind of the role of the developer really kind of going from just a big property developer right down to micro property developers who are doing sort of one-off developments at a time, right down to homeowner developers. And so the spectrum, I quite often refer to the homeowner spectrum, as really, really kind of growing, which is very interesting to see, especially in South African townships. In terms of the change and what's been amplified, when I in my previous life, when I worked for NGOs, we worked with an association of backyarders who had come together and were collectively saving to build houses together. And one of the things that they always used to talk about, and this kind of became like a common rhetoric, was around how backyarders were invisible because they were typically in hawkies behind houses. And so they couldn't be seen like an informal settlement was seen. And because it was one backyard, they weren't collectively seen as, like a settlement like Barcelona or Europe are seen. And I think that the pandemic has really shifted that for us, because the emergence of new informal settlements, which have been created by backyarders being pushed out, is really made backyarders visible in many ways. And so I think this pandemic has really made backyarders visible, the kind of the informal end of the spectrum of backyarding, but also it's really kind of shifted focus on like the importance of good quality housing spaces, and whether that's from a flattened Sea Point or a bachelor's in Khayelitsha. If we're going to be stuck at home again in the near future, which I mean is not unlikely, then we're going to need good quality spaces, and those good quality spaces are important.
For the benefit of our listeners who might be listening from further afield than Cape Town, just when you talk about Barcelona and Europe and so forth, those are obviously informal settlements within Cape Town. And I think what's really interesting, the way you're distinguishing at the outset there, Claire, is this idea of both the sort of the formal, and I guess what we see in many of these backyards, some of them are very formal structures, and we're seeing a sort of an uptake, and that's where Bitprop and so forth have got involved, is in trying to establish a more formal product. And so, I mean, what is that type of product that you are interested in from the Bitprop model and the financing angle that you guys are coming in on?
Yes, so thanks for clarifying. The other day I said to my husband, "Oh, I'm just going to Barcelona this morning quickly," and he was like,
surely all flights are cancelled, no?
Yeah, so Barcelona actually happens to be very close to the airport, which is also kind of hilarious. Yes, I very much come to the conversation with a backyarding hat on, because the work that we do at Bitprop is predominantly focused on the development of backyard rental accommodation. What we noticed is an uptick in the formalization of backyard rental accommodation in South African townships. How it came about is I was doing some other work in RDP neighborhood in Cape Town, and we were going in every week for 2 or 3 years. And over time, we started to notice the slow addition of these backyards. Every week there was a new kind of like a double story going up, another one. And so we just got curious about not only why people or homeowners were doing this, but how they were doing it, how they were building it. Were they getting formal applications, building plan applications? Where were they getting the funding from? And this led to a formal feasibility study to really try and understand if there was a potential gap in the market for a business. And turns out there was. What lands up happening in a number of cases is that homeowners living in the government subsidized housing, often they can't leverage that asset, so they can't mortgage and get finance to be able to construct units. If they are able to leverage the units, they might not be able to get professional services to design and help submit those plans through building applications and land use. So what we developed is a company called Bitprop, and we offer a full professional service as well as the financing for backyard rental units. So we'll partner with a homeowner, we'll build the backyard rental units, and then the tenants pay us directly. And once our capital investment has been made back, so we share the rental with the homeowner for 8 to 10 years. And once our capital investment has been made back, then the homeowner gets the full rental income from those units on their property.
I guess immediately some of the descriptions there you've given us is this idea of an increasing phenomena, so sort of an uptake here in Cape Town of this type of unit. So one of the questions I'm going to try and probe you on is, when did we start to see this phenomena occur more regularly here in Cape Town? Recognizing that we've spoken to other people around the country, backyarding's always been part of the game, but it seems to have certainly taken on a different pace and different form. And when you describe, I guess, double-story structures, that comes with its own challenges, I guess, in terms of the safety of that construction and the whole thing of, the integrity of the structure being absolutely important to ensure that there's not structural failure and so forth. Any thoughts on this thing of when things started to happen here in Cape Town, why they started to happen, and then this thing of the integrity of the structure, Claire?
I was aware, there had been a few studies and kind of talk about this densification and kind of almost like hostel style units in Dunoon in, I guess, mid to late 2015. It became a blip on my radar. And when at the time I was working for Development Action Group, I was lucky enough to work with Zama and John Spiropoulos at Development Action Group, two very influential people in the space at the moment, in the backyard rental space at the moment. That in another projects we were working on, we started to see these units pop up. And in 2016, we did another study for the Centre for Affordable Housing Finance, and we started to notice them more and more in Delft. And then I guess late 2015, early 2016, when they started to kind of become noticeable. And then 2017, 2018, it kind of just took off in many ways. And I think, I know the number, I'm not entirely sure of the updated figures, but at the end of 2018, I was in a workshop with Charles Rudman, and he said that they had over 6,000 applications for this type of backyard rental units in Khayelitsha alone in that year. So it would be incredibly interesting to see that updated figure now. In terms of the structural integrity, I think that is something that is so incredibly important. Obviously, it comes a lot with plans, regulations, and getting plans approval, which is something that we obviously do, because it's not a throwaway asset. It's not like a quick investment. And obviously, we need this to last longer than the 10 years that we share the rental with a homeowner, but it needs to last a lot longer than that. And also, we can't have these buildings falling down. I think even I don't want to use the word informal, but even in the cases where people are building without an engineer or without formal building plans, we are seeing that almost like a mimicking of what's being done elsewhere. So even if homeowners, or even if those construction companies are not using like a precast slab or a reinforced concrete steel slab, there is a working towards achieving a structural integrity. Overall, I think there is a standard within the building industry that people are trying to stick to, at least, especially when going double story.
It's interesting you mentioned Charles there, Claire. And I mean, Charles Rudman was instrumental in taking a report through council, which got quite a lot of media coverage over the last couple of weeks. And I'm just looking at some of the snapshots of those stats that he reflected on, and the report reflected on, and talked about a survey that covered almost 22%, so just a quarter or so of Khayelitsha, and that it was estimated that 60% of property owners in that Khayelitsha area had been using their property to provide additional housing opportunities, and that 40% of those were formal. And that the estimate in terms of numbers was that about 7,500 additional housing opportunities had been provided from an initial starting point of 9,000 properties. That was excluding informal settlement areas and so forth. So there's some of the numbers that we saw recently from Khayelitsha. Obviously, that's a sample and not the whole of Khayelitsha, but the numbers are thousands. And I think that's the point that almost the business opportunity you talk about when you start talking about that critical scale. it becomes of interest to the private sector. And I mean, maybe you can tell us a bit about how did Bitprop come about? You've told us a bit about the business model. Maybe you want to try and explain who are your clients, who do you partner with, and what is the starting premise of that relationship that you have with them?
This is exactly it. Often investors, one of the questions that investors ask us is like, the market can't be that big. Surely you're going to run out of property owners to partner with. To which I reply, see this map of Khayelitsha and tell me if you think we're going to run out of properties. We started in late 2018 to beginning of 2019. Like I said, I had been doing some work in informal settlement upgrading with an NGO and community-driven housing processes. And my path kind of serendipitously crossed with an entrepreneur who was looking at ways of transforming housing assets into pension assets for South Africans. And he had been doing some work with a Dutch pension fund who were trying to understand how they could encourage low-income South Africans to save towards pensions and to establish pension assets for low-income South Africans. And so we got collaborating. We also then partnered with another entrepreneur who had been working with the Free Market Foundation to give away title deeds or to process title deeds to some of the housing, like the government housing that had never had the title deeds transferred. Initially, because we had that pension kind of mindset, we sort of had looked at a bunch of other research around microlending and affordable housing in the global south. And from that research found that it's more likely that women will pay back microloans. So we're like, okay, great. We're going to find older women who have property. If the title is a little bit messy, that's fine. We'll take those properties. We'll try and sort out the title deed issues. We'll finance this. We'll build the rental units. We'll train the homeowner in terms of property management skills, and we'll create a pension asset for these older women. Over the 2 years, we've definitely had to change our tact a little bit. We've done a lot of, here comes a business buzzword, pivoting. We've had to really kind of look at how we find homeowners and the type of homeowner that we partner with, because that's obviously it's a long-term relationship that we're getting into with someone. As it stands at the moment, we accept applications from men and women. We don't necessarily prioritize women, but we do tend to have more application from women. We need the title deed, obviously, for planning reasons to be in the homeowner's name. So if there are title deed issues, we often partner with the Transaction Support Center, which is run by the Center for Affordable Housing Finance, and we send them there to kind of eke out any title deed issues. And then when we're looking for a homeowner to partner with, we try and focus on their connection within their neighborhood. And in our interview process and in our assessment process, we try and understand if they have good relationships with their neighbors, if they have good relationships with the street committee, if they're willing to take on the responsibility of what it means to be a property manager. Because I think for a lot of people, you can see the development in Khayelitsha. I mean, you just drive around and, I don't know, like 1 in 10 properties is going up at the moment. It's probably less than that, but that's kind of what it looks like visually. And I think it's very enticing in many ways for people just to be like, oh, you know, this is such an easy way to make extra money. But the fact of the matter is that you're going to be sharing your space with another 4 to sometimes 12 people on your property, coming and going at different times, on different schedules, making noise, like maybe there's a kid with one of the couples. And so we look for the soft kind of skills that come with being a good or landowner, homeowner. We don't always get that right. Sometimes we get it wrong, but most of the time we get it right. And when we partner with homeowners, then, like I said earlier, we design and develop the rental accommodation. But then we want this person to help them understand, what does it mean to be a good property manager? What are your responsibilities as the Bitprop partner? What does long-term maintenance look like? What are things that you should check every month? What are things that you can check every 4 months? And so in this process, we really try and do an extensive training so that when we step out of the picture in 8 to 10 years, the homeowner is equipped with the skills to be able to continue to manage that property.
I guess there must be some limits to the reach of your model in terms of when you're partnering with clients, in terms of their income level as much as their capital, as in what they've got saved. How when you're looking at the assets and the profile of your landowner and the developer, in essence, how do you look at that? And what is the typical profile of your clients?
First off, we don't ask our homeowner partners to put any capital in terms of like any financial capital. The bit that they bring to the party is the property. So we don't ask if they have any savings or for like a lump sum or deposits of that kind. Initially, when we started, because as I mentioned, we were looking at this as a pension asset, we were looking for and accepting homeowners who didn't have any income. And the idea was to generate a sustainable income for them. That has since changed because obviously our model is very capital intensive. It costs us about R500,000 to develop 4 rental units on a property. What we have been trying to do over the last year is to partner with typical financial institutions like banks to be able to say, look, we have developed this, we've taken the initial risk, we've developed this rental generating asset. Can you now take it over as a traditional home loan? And then the bank would then come in and pay us out our investment and enter into a home loan agreement with the homeowner. But because banks and traditional finance institutions are very rigid in many ways, they obviously have their own criteria that applicants for home loans need to meet. So we now are looking at an age limit of between 45 and 50. We can't really take much older than 45. And then they need to have an income as well. They can't just, the banks are not happy with just the rental income as a revenue. Typically, we're looking at people sort of between 40 or 35 and 40 who are earning between 6,500 and 12,000 Rand a month in our homeowners. I think what's really interesting though is our tenant profiles, because a lot of people are like, oh, but 3,000 Rand is so expensive. But I think what we are really starting to see is we're starting to see it or understand that tenants are young working adults who have graduated or have got some kind of qualification, and they're earning anywhere between 8 and 25,000 Rand a month. So, 2,500 to 3,000 Rand a month is not a large amount of money out of those income bands.
So Claire, you were talking about the support that you give your clients, in terms of helping them to become good property managers. Is there any other support that Bitprop offers, kind of drawing up leasing agreements and, helping them source tenants, or is that kind of all over to them after a certain point?
My marketing manager hates it when I use this term, but we are a bit of a one-stop shop. So during the build process, which is about 8 weeks, we visit the homeowner once a week to do the training and I guess the education. We take them through an education pack, and part of that pack is a set. So we obviously have a contract that we sign with the homeowner, and then we have a tenant homeowner contract, which is essentially a template which they then use to contract. And so that covers all the bases in terms of the legalities for the contract between them and their tenants. But then there is space for them to add additional rules and regulations that they might want to add. And they are allowed to obviously kind of make changes within that contract when they are negotiating with the tenant. In the beginning, we have quite a big following on Facebook. So when a property is completed, for like right in the beginning, then we will advertise on our platforms, but we send the tenants directly to the homeowner. So the homeowner is, from day one, she is responsible for showing tenants around, advertising the rooms herself as well, and then deciding, in a case where there are multiple tenants applying for one room, it's up to the homeowner to decide who gets that room. We often, in the first sort of 6 months, we offer a lot of assistance there. But once the rooms have been filled the first time, then it's really, we kind of leave it up to the homeowner to, and we see that as the homeowner's responsibility right from the beginning. The other type of assistance we do also offer is, in the training, we encourage homeowners to open a separate bank account that allows the rental income to go into, and we encourage homeowners to not see that as a quick additional income or revenue stream from the beginning, but rather to reinvest for the first 5 years back into the property. So one of our homeowners, in the first couple of months, she put up additional washing lines for her tenants. And then within 6 months, she had then also saved up enough, and she paved the whole yard round the tenants' access and come in and out their entrance area. Another one of our homeowners has stockpiled some bricks, and with her December income, she intends to build, or her November income, she intends to build a braai area, so in December her tenants can have braais and can sort of socialize outdoors. Those are kind of some of the extra things. And in the 10 years that we have an agreement with our homeowners, we also, part of the money, the portion of the money that we keep is in a maintenance fund. And that maintenance, so we pay for any maintenance in that 10-year agreement, whether it be a leaking tap, repainting every so often. But we also encourage homeowners to understand that that maintenance process will become their responsibility once our agreement is over.
Yeah, that sounds like a really, I suppose, empowering relationship, just to give the homeowner, so much like autonomy over their space, which I think is something that's very important in these kinds of models. It's not just taking the power out of people's hands. And so I think, kind of expanding on that, another very fascinating part of the Bitprop model for me is helping the owners secure the title deeds. And you referred to it a little bit earlier, and you just said that, kind of makes things easier in terms of drafting plans and things. Is there anything else that's important about helping to secure ownership, I suppose, just from like the owner's point of view, do they feel more empowered? Can you kind of cite any examples of what you've seen when you help people secure those title deeds?
To talk to your point on empowerment, that's really kind of what our business is. Kind of one of our key visions is around empowerment. We we saw this happening without us. People are doing this in townships across South Africa by themselves without the likes of Bitprop. But to be able, and so we never wanted to take that away. We just wanted to offer other homeowners who might not qualify for bank loans or personal finance an opportunity to have access to some type of finance. Obviously, there's a risk involved. Well, there's a perceived risk, and so us continuing to have that relationship in terms of the tenants paying us directly is more to do with the fact that it's a risk mitigating action in a way. And I think that's one of the reasons why our model also works so well, is because of that empowerment of that homeowner. Because she lives on the site, she is dealing with the tenants every day. If there is a problem, so a lot of our homeowners have set up WhatsApp groups with their tenants, and on the 25th of the month or coming up to payday, they'll send a message, hey guys, don't forget to pay your rent on time. If you have any problems, please let me know ahead of time so we can make a plan. And this constant kind of relationship, or this close relationship of the homeowners with the tenants through this empowering practice, I guess, is I think what really saved us through COVID, because tenants felt safe enough to come forward and say, I've lost my job. I'm a waiter. I'm not going to get paid. Is there something I can do? And then make a plan. And we were able to make payment plans with those tenants. To go back to your question about title deeds, yes, we had a big kind of focus on how we were going to be able to do this, even for properties that didn't have title deeds. Those were definitely grand plans that we haven't abandoned altogether, but we've definitely let them have the back seat. So we had an instance where one of the homeowners, the title deed was in her and her ex-husband's name, and then through helping her to transfer it into her name, there's that sense of relief in a way that this is no longer hanging over her like, oh, could he come back and claim it? Is this still, that underlying anxiety of the unknown? And I think that's kind of one of the greatest area we've seen it in. In a lot of the cases of our applications, a lot of people have come and said, oh, the title deed is in my late mother's name, but I have 3 sisters, but they all agree that this house is my house and I'm the one whose name it should be in. Those cases get tricky if there isn't a will, and so we're really trying to work on ways to make those transfers go a little bit easier, and work with the deeds office to see, because it would actually be interesting for me to run the numbers and see how many cases like that we get. But I would say about 10%, maybe more, 20% of the applications that we have at the moment are cases like that, where it's in a deceased parent's name. And now, because it's in a deceased parent's name, you can't apply for building. And so that land just immediately, and the longer you leave it, we have one case where it's the woman who lives in the house now, it's in her grandmother's name, and her grandmother has passed away and her mother has passed away, and she has 4 sisters. And now to try and get it into any one of those sisters' names to be able to build rental units is near impossible. So it's really important that we work on these type of cases so that these houses don't become these kind of little dead spots in the townships that can't be developed simply because the systems are too archaic to keep up.
Could you just maybe talk a little bit about what the incentives are? We have touched on it mostly, but perhaps like any other incentives, to formalize their process. And then also on the other side, maybe talk about like the investors that you are working with and what the reception has been like from the investor standpoint.
The big incentive is really the future revenue stream that this asset will provide. There are a lot of cases where the applicants are applying because they have grandkids and they're worried about their grandkids' education or support in the future. And that's really the big incentive. When I think about it from an architecture and urbanist kind of point of view, I'm like, this is great. I'm obviously thinking on a macro township level. This is going to change the way our townships operate. If we add other services, like if we turn one of our rental units into a creche or into a laundry or a coffee shop, we're going to start to create these really great little neighborhoods. But for me, there's so many other incentives on an urban level. But for homeowners, the incentive is really this long-term increased revenue stream. So take, for instance, the one homeowner who I was with today. She's a facilities worker at a factory in Epping. She earns 6,000 Rand a month. We have built 8 units with her on her property, and those are currently renting at 3,000 Rand a month. So they're 25 square meter units, so they're quite spacious. They all have an ensuite bathroom and a single kitchen sink with a little cupboard below it. Already, that's in 8 years' time, when her youngest grandson is finishing school, she's going to be earning an additional 24,000 plus the increase, because obviously the prices will go up over the years. But she's going to be earning, an extra 24,000 Rand a month. And that's huge for her, because she knows that she'll be able to support her grandson. She knows she'll be able to support herself in retirement. And that really is just the biggest incentive. It's not to say it's not without its challenges. I think as the market continues to grow and as these applications get approved and more get built, it's going to become more and more competitive, like it is anywhere. On our next builds, we're already going to be adding built-in cupboards to our units and extending the kitchenette, because that's what other people in the market are doing. And so to keep competitive, we have to kind of keep up with what's happening. It also means that if we're able to provide that competitive edge, that we don't have a big tenant churn, which is ideally what we would like. But just to speak to the investor question, it's been tricky. The last 2 years, I think I've learned the most about like how not to approach and how to approach different types of investors and funders, because we were targeting women and essentially creating an affordable housing product and working towards a lot of the sustainable development goals. We were like, okay, cool, maybe we can approach big UK aid or like the Swedish Development Bank and development finance institutions. And they were all kind of like, no, this is too small, And one of the other tacks that we used was to approach individuals, and then individuals were kind of like, yeah, okay, I'll give you a little bit of CSI money here or there. Some of the bigger kind of financial institutions have said like, yes, we'll only give you 100 million when you get to this amount of properties. And it was like, I don't know, it was like 200 properties or something. It has been really tricky to secure funding. We have got a lot of foreign investment into the space, which has been really helpful. Part of the reason I think it's been hard to get funding is this perceived risk. There's not a lot of data around townships and rental in the townships, and people are just kind of, it's a black hole, really. You can't just jump onto a rental website like TPN or something and be like, okay, what's the average rental for this area? Or, what's the average tenant profile? Do they pay there? There's no data. And so part of our strategy is also to collect a lot of this data, to be able to point to the data to say, look, this risk, you keep telling us this is a high risk investment. It's not. During COVID, during lockdown, when big property management companies were reporting like 50% non-payment on rentals. We had, out of the 34 units, we had 2 units that weren't able to pay their rent, and we made payment plans with them, and it was sorted. There's definitely a perceived risk, which I think has scared a lot of investors unnecessarily. Just last week, we actually took a British gentleman interested in investing out to site, and I was driving him, and he was like, "Where are we now?" So I was like, "No, we're in Khayelitsha." So he was like, "No, but I don't understand. This doesn't look like Khayelitsha." And I think because the edges of our townships are typically informal settlements, and that's what people see when they drive along the N2. They see the informality and they just are like, well, that's Khayelitsha, and they assume that that informality is the whole of Khayelitsha. So there's also like a nuanced understanding that we're trying to bring to investors, to say, like, look, just like the southern suburbs, you've got Constantia, you've got Plumstead, you've got Deep Rivier. Like, there's different neighborhoods within Khayelitsha and Elita Park, where we predominantly operate, is fancy. And I think that's kind of the benefit of being able to take people to sites, is also just to be able to open people's eyes a little bit and dispel some of that ignorance around like what South African townships are.
Just on that point, Claire, obviously you're describing the sort of Cape Town context in a particular part in and around that Khayelitsha and Elita Park, etc. Where else are we seeing a take up in this approach? Are you being approached by or considering other metros where obviously densities and urbanization pressures and so forth, particularly through this backyarding model, are quite prevalent? From a spatial extent, where do you think this can continue? And are you seeing are you interested in other areas around the city of Cape Town, or the predominant focus here within that Khayelitsha space?
In time, we want to be able to build absolutely anywhere. So if someone applied from Bergfleet, we want to be able to build with them in Bergfleet. But that's going to come with a lot of the work that we're doing around modularization and being able to like reduce our production line on the architectural side of things. We're seeing big demand in Joburg. We've got a lot of interest from people up in Joburg, and we kind of just point them to the companies that are doing what we are doing up in Gauteng. But it definitely is our goal and our vision to expand. Ideally, we'd like to be working all over Africa. The big areas of interest in Cape Town at the moment are definitely largely coming from Khayelitsha. We've got quite a lot of interest from Umfuleni, which is just over the highway. A lot of interest from Philippi. We've actually got some applications from Hout Bay, like in Hangberg. Yeah, so kind of from all over the place. We haven't had anyone from Dunoon, so we haven't done any major marketing around applying to be a homeowner. We printed flyers for the first time last week, and we're kind of distributing them within the areas that we want to work in. At the moment, because we're such a small team, we need to be quite smart about how we work. And so the reason we're working in Elita Park at the moment is because the plots are a lot bigger, and our standard plan, which we have had cost, and we know, okay, to build 100 square meters costs us X, and we can get 4 units in 100 square meters. So we can quickly do the calculations and figure out if our standard plan is going to fit onto a property. And they tend to fit onto the properties in Elita Park much more easily. And so that's why we focused there. But in time, once we've managed to automate a lot of that kind of work, we're hoping, and diversify our build a little bit, we're hoping that we'll be able to accept applicants who don't have any space in their backyard and want to go double story on top of their existing house. But those are our long-term plans.
This is all absolutely fascinating, Claire. And I mean, I guess the question I mentioned a council report that served at Cape Town a couple of weeks or months ago that was talking about this type of development being an important supply side. And I guess the question that is increasingly being raised is, what has been the level of, let's say, government support for this type of initiative up to this point from your perspective? And how do you think that's going to change now that, you know, there seems to be a critical mass and a renewed energy, not only from the private sector and finance, but also in terms of sort of government maybe realizing that it's not going to be able to build its way out of our housing challenges that we have here in South Africa?
We've received a lot of really great support from the Khayelitsha planning office. I mean, we obviously go through the same process as everyone else. We've had some really great planners in the department help us, show us the ropes and kind of understand how best to design the units so that we can, you know, avoid obvious triggers like any type of deviations that we don't want to have to go through to make the plans get passed as quickly as possible. And I think that this report that you mentioned also kind of speaks to a subsidy. And for me, I personally, you know, one of the big kind of warning bells that a lot of people goes off in a lot of people's minds is, but what about the bulk infrastructure? And if these neighborhoods were designed, I mean, Khayelitsha was designed for like a handful of people compared to the population that lives there now. But, you know, if neighborhoods were designed for these single, maybe double residential plots, and now we're putting, you know, 8 units on these plots, surely how is the sewage going to handle? How's the water, electricity, all of that kind of stuff? And so for me, I think where the government really needs to, and where we'll continue to put pressure on municipalities and government to come to the party, is to say, okay, nationally, you've now committed to plot and plan. That's fine. But you need to come and you need to put in the services. You need to upgrade services that need to be upgraded. And you need to look at the public realm. I always use a really simple one of upgrading pavements. And I think one of the things that we work with our homeowners on is understanding rates and what, you know, so up until a point you might not have been having to pay rates or water, but now that you're going to have more people, more consumption, it's important to pay your rates. And this is why it's important to pay your rates. And I think if we see, or if homeowners can see better services in the area, parks being upgraded, pavements being upgraded, road potholes being filled in, they'll understand that their money, their rates money, is going towards something that's improving the area as a whole and making the area more attractive, and so potentially making the rental demand go up and their rental price and their rental income go up. So we're really trying to close those gaps, but proving that the private sector is completely capable of providing finance and development, like the services to build. And so, yeah, personally, I don't think the subsidy is necessary to be able to offer people to build additional backyard dwellings, and that money should rather just go into the public realm in whatever way it can.
The question of IT and technology in not just Bitprop, but the whole sort of this idea of tech prop and the influence of technology on the property market, particularly this affordable market that you guys are engaging with. Do you see that's going to be something that's going to increase in the years to come, in the months to come even? That things are changing so quickly right now.
Yeah, I mean, we were having a conversation about it in the office today, and it's, you know, we are seen to be this essentially like a rental development company, but we actually fundamentally at our core are a prop tech company, and that's what we're really working towards. And I think it's incredibly exciting, the potential that property apps and platforms are going to be able to offer in the future. And, you know, at the moment, if a tenant has an issue, the tenant WhatsApps me on my private phone, and then I call the maintenance guy and the maintenance guy goes out. But we're working towards integrating with other apps, like the sweep south essentially of maintenance apps. So where you can log your services on this maintenance app, and then from the Bitprop app, if you're a tenant and your tap is leaking, you can immediately just report that, and within 5 minutes a plumber will be on their way and the plumber will get paid through the app. That kind of integration is what we're really kind of looking for long term. And like simple things as well, like kind of how can we improve the services that we're currently offering, like silly things like being able to have free Wi-Fi, so that, or like a portion of free Wi-Fi at least, so that if your electricity goes out, you can still purchase prepaid electricity through your app without having to like go outside to the spaza down the road and buy like a little coupon. But also then kind of taking it to the next level to really say, like, how can we completely reimagine rental spaces in townships, and how can we allow our tenants to become landlords in a way, by if they're going away on business or home to the Eastern Cape, or for whatever reason they aren't going to be there, like, is there a way that they can short-term lease their room and cover a few costs there? I think technology is both going to play a huge role in how the tenant engages with the homeowner, with us, with maintenance teams, but also, I mean, the potential of technology to smooth building processes and refine building processes, improve quality, so that teams can be moving from one site to the next site and putting up these rental units in a much more rapid time frame at a better quality. Like, I think tech is going to play a huge role there as well, which will in the long run benefit, have a huge benefit for the homeowner, because they can start making a rental income much sooner, for the tenant because they'll have a better quality space and living environment to live in, and for the area in general, in terms of what the neighborhoods look like and feel, and are able to grow into really sustainable, livable neighborhoods.
Okay, from both of Pete and I think it's been a really great conversation. Just to wrap up, how can we find out more about the projects that you have in the pipeline, and how can we get hold of you if we want to reach out in any way?
Pop onto our website. Everything is there. We have a little link that if you are a homeowner or you're a property owner and you are interested in doing this on your own property, you can apply there. You can see the projects that we have built. You can link through to our Instagram if you are of that generation. I'm trying to convince our team that we need a TikTok, but we don't have that yet. But everything is on our website, or you can visit our Facebook page. Our website is www.bitprop.com. So not Britpop, but Bitprop, bitprop.com. And then, you can just search for Bitprop on Facebook.
Claire, you've given us almost an hour of your time, over an hour of your time this evening. And I just want to thank you and the Bitprop team for the time and effort and the initiative. It really is exciting. I certainly could talk for another hour or two about this. It's a topic which is very close to my heart. I'm learning every day about it, and you've really helped me shape my thinking. I genuinely hope that the listeners out there have enjoyed hearing from you. And it'd be great if we can make a plan in the new year to maybe come back to you and speak to you and maybe some of your clients about the impact that this initiative has had on their life, and how it's starting to change the nature and the typologies available in our townships. So thank you so much, Claire. All the very, very best.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and I would love to come back in the new year with and bring some of the homeowners on, and you can just hear some of the joy in their voices and their stories.
Well, we'll definitely look at take you up on that, and we'll talk about it in the new year. Amal, thanks so much for co-driving and with me tonight. Really been great to have you back on the Talking Transformation podcast. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Pete, and thank you so much, Claire. This was a really, really interesting conversation.
Thanks, Amal. It was lovely to chat.
All the best, guys. Keep safe. We know the numbers are going up and up. It's not a good time. Look after yourself. Be safe and be kind to yourself. All the best.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Talking Transformation podcast. Please engage with us and let us know your thoughts on this episode. You can do so via the Anchor podcast platform. There's a voice message function available via the app. You can also follow us on Twitter via Talking Transfo and the number 1. So Talking Transfo 1. Our theme music is kindly made available by Tribal Need. Find out about the music, the street art shows here in Cape Town and Europe via tribalneed.com.